Lisbon's many hidden nooks and crannies are home to numerous attractions that continue to surprise and seduce visitors. The city's charm lies in the inspiring architecture, enchanting squares and Moorish legacy. Given the steep streets and steps of the Alfama quarter, the least strenuous approach is to start from the top and work your way down. Tram 28 will take you to the top of the Alfama district. Walk around the maze of winding alleyways will reveal picturesque corners and churches, as well as panoramic views from the shady terraces. Castle of St. George. Following the recapture of Lisbon from the Moors in 1147, King Alfonso transformed their hilltop citadel into the residence of the Portuguese kings. Visitors can climb the towers and walk along the reconstructed ramparts of the castle walls. Castle Museum displays artifacts from the archaeological site and charts the history of the city. The stalls of the so-called Thieves' Market have occupied the site on the edge of the Alfama for over a century, laid out under the shade of trees and canopies. As the fame of this flea market has grown, bargains are increasingly hard to find among the mass of bric-a-brac. Santa Igreja, one of Lisbon's most striking landmarks. The soaring dome of Santa Igreja punctures the skyline in the east of the city. The interior is paved with coloured marble and crowned by a great giant cupola. As the national pantheon, it houses cenotaphs and tombs of Portuguese heroes. St. Vincent de Fora. St. Vincent was proclaimed Lisbon's patron saint in 1173, when his relics were transferred from the Algarve in southern Portugal to a church on this site. Printed ceiling of the 18th century Baroque style of St. Vincent de Fora. There are many tiled rural scenes and surrounded by flora designs and cherubs. These date back to the 18th century. Praça do Comércio is most commonly known by the locals as the Palace Square. This huge open space was the site of the Royal Palace for 400 years. In the northwest corner of the square is the Lisbon Welcome Centre, which has a tourist information service with restaurants and shops. If the weather's too hot, then you can always take shade in the arches along the north side of the Praça de Comércio. In the centre of the square is the equestrian statue of King Hussein I. At one end of the square you have the Tagus River Basin. The impressive Arc de Rue Augusta on the north side of the square leads to the Rua Augusta Street and is the gateway to Baixa. A lively, pedestrianised street decorated with mosaic pavements and lined with boutiques and open-air cafes. Rua Augusta is the main tourist thoroughfare and the smartest street in Baixa. The Elevator de Santa Justa is a neo-Gothic lift. It was built by the turn of the 20th century by a French architect. Made of iron and embellished with filigree, it is one of the most eccentric features of Baixa. Passengers can travel up and down inside the tower in one of the two smart wood-panelled cabins with brass fittings. At the top of the elevator is a walkway, linking it to the Lago di Carmo. The top of the tower can be reached by an extremely tight spiral stairway. At the top of the elevator, make your way to the Bairro Alto district and make your way into the Igreja de Carmo. Graceful skeleton arches of this Carmelite church, once the largest in Lisbon, stand as a reminder of the earthquake of 1755. As the congregation were attending Mass, the shockwaves of the earthquake caused the church to collapse, depositing tons of masonry onto the people. Nowadays, the main body of the church and the chancel, whose roof withstood the earthquake, houses the Museum di Carmo. The facade of this house, erected in 1864, shows figures of science, agriculture, industry and commerce. This area has lots of restaurants and bars that are well worth a visit. Palace of Belem, also known as the Pink Palace. Because of its faded pink facade, the former royal palace is the residence of the Portuguese president. It also houses the Museum de Presidência da República. This 19th century cafe sells pastries, rich custard in a flaky pastry cup, called Pastéis de Belem. The Jardim Botanico Tropical has exotic plants and trees gathered from Portugal's former colonies fill these peaceful gardens, which was once part of the Palacio de Belem. This monastery is the accumulation of Manueline architecture in this period, commissioned by Manuel I in around 1501. The cloister was completed in 1554. Delicate tracery and richly carved images decorate the arches and the balustrades. Spectacular vaulting in the church of Santa Maria is held aloft by slender octagonal pillars. These rise like palm trees to the roof, creating a feeling of space and harmony. The tomb of Vasco da Gama, the 19th century tomb of the navigator, is carved with all shapes and seafaring symbols. The walls of the monastery refectory are decorated with 18th century tiles. The panel at the northern end depicts the feeding of the 5,000. Standing prominently on the Belem waterfront, this massive angular monument, the Monument to the Discoveries, was built in 1960 to mark the 500th anniversary of the death of Henry the Navigator. The Belem Tower was commissioned by Manuel I. The tower was built as a fortress in the middle of the Tagus in 1514 to 20, the starting point for the navigators who set out to discover the trade routes. This gem became the symbol of Portugal's greatest era of expansion. If you have a couple of hours to spare, it's well worth setting off to a little place called Sintra. Sintra's stunning setting on the north slopes of the Granite Sierra. On the highest peaks of Serra de Sintra stands the spectacular palace of Pena, an amazing medley of architectural styles built in the 19th century for the husband of the young Queen Maria II. Palace buildings are painted the original daffodil yellow and strawberry pink. It is said that this design of the castle may have influenced Walt Disney productions. A studded archway with turrets greets the visitor at the entrance of the palace. The Arab room has marvellous frescoes that cover the walls and ceiling. One of the loveliest rooms in the palace. The Orient was a great inspiration of Romanticism. The spacious Great Hall is sumptuously furnished with Oriental porcelain and 4 life-size torchbearers holding giant candelabras. In the kitchen, the copper pots and utensils still hang around the iron stove.